Rome has always been relentless. His army crushed civilizations, conquered kingdoms, and transformed Italy into its absolute domain. But there was a people who challenged Rome like no other. They were the Samnites, a fierce, proud warrior people who for centuries have fought battles against Rome, forming alliances with some of the greatest military leaders in history. These people were not afraid to challenge the Roman Republic. They used the mountains as natural fortresses, ambushed legions, and imposed defeats that Rome would never forget. They were responsible for one of the greatest humiliations in Roman history, a moment that made Roman generals doubt their own invincibility. But after all, who were the Samnites? How did you manage to challenge Rome for so long? What you are about to find out will change your view of the conquest of Rome and those who dare to resist. To understand the grandeur of the Samnites, we need to go back in time, for a time when Rome was not yet the unbeatable power we know. In the heart of the Italic Peninsula, amid relentless mountains and deep valleys, there was a land called Samnium. It was a hostile territory, marked by rocky slopes, dense forests, and treacherous corridors. But for the Samnites, that was not an obstacle. It was his home and his greatest defense. They emerged around the first millennium before Christ, descending from the group of the Osco-Ampando peoples, which populated central Italy long before Rome dreams of the conquest of the world. His tongue, Osco, was spoken by several neighboring tribes, but the Samnites had something that differentiated them: a fierce warrior culture and an indomitable spirit. Unlike the Romans, who had an organized and centralized republic, the Samnites did not have a unified government. They were divided into independent tribes, such as the Hirpines, Pentris, and Caracines, each with their own leaders and customs. But that did not mean weakness. On the contrary, this decentralization made the Samnites unpredictable and difficult to subdue. When a threat arose, either from Rome or any other enemy, they formed temporary confederations, uniting forces to resist any invader. Their way of life made them formidable warriors, accustomed to difficult land, surface attacks, and adversity resistant. Samnites' lives was shaped by the hostile environment they called home. Samnium's mountainous geography was a decisive factor in the identity of this people. Surrounded by cliffs, narrow valleys, and dangerous trails, the Samnites learned early to survive in a territory that punished the weak and rewarded resistant. This made them naturally prepared for war. While the Roman armies depended on rigid formations and well-constructed roads, the Samnites dominated the art of irregular war. They moved quickly, attacked by surprise, and disappeared in the mountains before the enemy could react. Each cave, each gorge, each hidden trail was a weapon against unsuspecting invaders. His faith was deeply animist. They believed that spirits inhabited forests, rivers, mountains, and even the winds. Each element of nature had a divine essence, and the Samnites worshipped these spirits, seeking their protection before each battle, each harvest, and each dangerous journey. But among all its traditions, none was as unique and enigmatic as Sacrum Sea, the sacred spring. When difficult times were rocked over Samnium, either by war, hunger, or internal crises, the Samnites used this ancestral ritual. The young people of the tribe were sent to colonize new lands, but they didn't leave alone. They were guided by a sacred bull. The animal, considered a divine manifestation, chose the direction of the journey, and the Samnites followed him without question. Where the bull stopped, there would be founded a new community. This is how many Samnitic tribes spread throughout the peninsula, carrying their culture and courage beyond the mountains of Samnium. Surrounded by cliffs, narrow valleys, and dangerous trails, The Samnites learned early to survive in a territory that punished the weak and rewarded resistant. This made them naturally prepared for war. While the Roman armies depended on rigid formations and well-constructed roads, the Samnites dominated the art of irregular war. They moved quickly, attacked by surprise, and disappeared in the mountains before the enemy could react. Each cave, each gorge, each hidden trail was a weapon against unsuspecting invaders. But not only of war lived these people. The Samnite economy was based on agriculture and livestock, with fertile fields cultivating cereals, grapes, and olives, as sheaps of sheep and goats grazed in the hills. Its products were exchanged with other peoples of the peninsula, and over time their commercial interactions brought external influences that shaped their culture. The Samnites were also bold conquerors. While Rome was still consolidated as a regional power, the Samnites already expanded their domain, facing powerful enemies and gaining strategic territories. Its first major rivals were the Etruscans, who controlled vast areas of the peninsula and dominated the trade and culture of the time. But the Samnites did not fear the northern lords. And when the two peoples came into dispute for the control of the fertile region of Campania, it was the blood that decided the fate of the territory. Campania was a coveted prize. Its lands were fertile, its rich cities, and its essential strategic position for the control of central Italy. The Samnites knew that if they wanted to expand, they had to take the region's jewelry, Capua. And that's exactly what they did. With cunning and brutality, the Samnites warriors took Capua from Etruscans, ensuring for themselves one of Italy's richest and most important cities. The achievement was a milestone in the history of the Samnite people, consolidating their power and showing the peninsula that they were not mere barbarians of the mountains. They were a people designed to shape the future of Italy. But Capua was not the only Samnite target. To the south, another enemy watched them with suspicion: the Greeks of Magna Greece. The Greek colonies in Italy had been founded centuries earlier, bringing with it wealth, refined culture, and a formidable military tradition. The Samnites saw the Greeks as rivals in the fight for control of the peninsula and did not hesitate to attack them. The biggest conflict came with the city of Neapolis, the current Naples. The Samnites advanced on the port city, took their defenses by surprise, and gained control of the region. Neapolis was a blow against the prestige of the Greeks, who saw their colonies weakening in the face of the advance of the Samnites warriors. But this achievement also attracted the attention of a new enemy, an enemy that would change the fate of Samnites forever: Rome. For a brief moment in history, Rome and the Samnites were not enemies, but allied for convenience. In 354 BC, both signed a treaty, dividing their areas of influence and keeping a fragile peace. But this truce would not last forever. Rome was growing too fast, and its expansion to Campania, the territory that the Samnites considered his own, made the conflict inevitable. In 343 BC, the war broke out. The Romans advanced and won the Battle of Monte Gaurus, near Capua. But what seemed an easy victory soon became a nightmare. The Samnites did not fight like the other enemies of Rome. They used the mountainous ground in their favor, ambushed legions, and cut their supply routes. Rome, accustomed to open field battles, was trapped in a war of ware. After 2 years of fighting without a decisive victory, Rome and the Samnites signed a peace treaty in 341 BC. Rome consolidated its influence on Campania, but failed to submit the Samnites. In the end, the First Samnite War resolved nothing, just postponed a much larger conflict. If Samnite World War ended without a definitive winner, World War II would be much brighter and more humiliating to Rome. It all began in 326 BC, when Rome founded the Fragile colony in Samnite territory. For the Samnites, that was an unacceptable provocation. The war was declared. At first, the Samnites proved to be even more formidable enemies than Rome expected. And in 321 BC, they imposed on the Republic one of the greatest humiliations in their history, the Battle of Caudine Forks. The Romans were attracted to a narrow valley and blocked at both extremes. Without supplies, no escape route, they were forced to surrender without fighting. But the true shame came later. The Samnites forced the Roman legions to pass under the Caudine yoke, a degrading ceremony of submission. Rome would never forget this affront, and as always, I would learn from defeat. In the following years, Rome reorganized, renovated his legions, and, most importantly, built the Via Appia, a military road that allowed the rapid displacement of troops to Samnium's heart. The war was dragged until 305 BC, when Rome finally won the Battle of Boviano. Exhausted and without allies, the Samnites were forced to sign a peace treaty in 304 BC this time. The treaty was not balanced. The Samnites lost territory and influence. Even after the defeat, they were not yet willing to accept Roman domination. They knew that alone they could not defeat Rome and then made the unthinkable. They gathered a coalition of enemies to face the Republic. In 298 BC, Samnites, Etruscan, Antilles, and Gauls joined forces in one last attempt to curb Roman expansion. For the first time, Rome faced an alliance of people who feared their growth. The decisive confrontation came in 295 BC, in the Battle of Centino, one of the greatest clashes in Italy's history. On the one hand, a colossal army of Samnites, Etruscan, Antille, and Gauls, a diverse force, united by common hatred against Rome. On the other, the Roman legions led by the consuls Fabio Rulliano and Publio Decio Muse. The battle was gigantic, brutal, and decisive. The Gauls, famous for their ferocity, attacked first, causing damage to the Roman lines. The Samnites, relentless as always, pressed the other flank. Rome was on the edge of the collapse. It was then that the Roman consul Publio Decio Muse made a legendary decision. He made a devotio, a ritual sacrifice, throwing himself against the enemy army and offering his life to the gods in exchange for Roman victory. Decio Muse's death inflamed the Roman legions. The soldiers, now taken by the spirit of revenge, fought with relentless fury, breaking the enemy lines and turning the battle game. The Gauls were massacred, and the Samnites were abandoned to their own luck. With their ruins coalition, the Samnites tried to continue the fight alone. But there was no hope anymore. Rome, merciless, marched straight to Samnium, crushing any remaining resistance. Finally, in 290 BC, the Samnites were subdued. Even after centuries of war against Rome, the Samnites had not yet given up. And when Carthaginian general Annibal Barca crossed the Alps and began his devastating campaign in Italy, they saw the perfect opportunity to rebel again. After Hannibal's overwhelming victory at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, Rome seemed vulnerable. It was then that the Samnites declared support to Carthage, providing warriors to reinforce the invading army and using the Samnium Mountains to launch surprise attacks against the Roman legions. But, like Pyrrho before him, Hannibal was also defeated. With the fall of Carthage, Rome returned all his fury against the Samnites. And this time there would be no pity. Rome was not content to defeat the resistance. She exterminated her. Their cities were looted, their massacred warriors, and Samnium was reduced to ruins. From that moment on, the Samnites were no longer an independent people and were absorbed by the Roman world. But the true end of the Samnites was not just the destruction of their cities. It was the erasure of its culture. His tongue, Osco, spoken by generations of warriors and tribal chiefs, disappeared. Latin, the language of the winners, took its place. Your customs, your traditions, your gods, everything was absorbed by the Roman world. The few survivors were assimilated, forced to become citizens of the empire who once tried to destroy. And so we come to the end of the history of the Samnites. They were more than just an obstacle in the expansion of Rome. They were one of the biggest challenges the Republic faced. For centuries, they resisted with all their strength, imposed humiliating defeats on the Romans, and almost changed the fate of the Italic Peninsula. The Samnites disappeared, but the spirit of resistance they carried never went out. Now, I want to know your opinion. If Rome needed 3 brutal wars to beat the Samnites and even suffered to keep the region under control, have they really been defeated? Tell me in the comments what you think. And if you like epic stories like this, you already know. Leave the like and subscribe to the channel. Click on the screen to learn more about the history of the Etruscan, the incredible civilization that shaped Rome. Until next time,